In the first topic in this lesson, we will be discussing and introducing SQL Azure Elastic Pools. Azure SQL Database Elastic Pools is a cost-effective solution for managing and scaling a group or a pool of multiple Azure SQL databases. And these databases will have a utilization pattern that's characterized by a sort of low average utilization with infrequent spikes, and potentially at different times too. So all databases in an Elastic Pool belong to one Azure SQL server. They will share a set number of eDTUs, Elastic DTUs. They will share a set number of Elastic Pool storage, are priced for eDTUs and not individual databases. So you buy a pool of DTUs and they are shared amongst those databases. The databases can scale up to a given maximum amount of eDTUs and they have a guaranteed minimum number of eDTUs. So when would you consider an Elastic Pool? In lesson 6 we worked on sharding. We sharded the ToyStore database into 2 individual shards, and each had 100 pieces of the customer's data. So let's say that each individual database is sized to a standard S3 service tier. So the example here is 100 DTUs and a DTU utilization that is shown in the graphic on the screen here. Now the graph shows the DTU utilization by time for the ToyStore Shard 1 database. Now it's evident from this graph that the ToyStore Shard 1 has an average DTU utilization of around 30 DTUs, but it does have a spike of around 80 DTUs at around 11 AM. Now the other shards have got similar graphs, however their peak times are different, as is shown in the following graphic. So let's say that the other 3 shards have got a similar graph, but the peak times are different. Now the graph in here is showing 4 shards in a combined graph. The average utilization is under 40 DTUs and the peak utilization is 90 DTUs. Okay, and the databases or shards actually peak at different times. Now at this point you could argue that you should use a standard S2 service tier, which offers 50 DTUs and costs less than the S3. This would suffice for the majority of this database's workload, which is generally below 50 DTUs. However, we get performance degradation at peak hours when the utilization hits 90 DTUs, which is obviously much greater than 50. Prior to Elastic Pools, you had 2 options when you were considering sizing your Azure SQL databases. We can over-provision, so say choose a standard S3 service tier to make sure we get optimum performance for peak hours. That obviously comes at a cost and there will be wasted DTUs. We can under-provision, so we could pick say a standard S2 service tier that would save cost. It would satisfy the majority but not all of our workload, and then during times of peak activity performance would suffer and potentially our user experience would deteriorate. Elastic Pools give us that third option, which allows us to balance performance with lower costs. So we allow us to share DTUs between our pool of databases.